Okay, so can we have the refuge and bodhicitta, please? Ye Jura Do Ye Jo Nam La Chanju Ba De Dani Gao Zu Ji Da Ye Jin So Ye So Nan Gi Ro La Pen Ji Sang Zhu Ba Na Shu. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. That's it, yeah, thanks. Essence. Oh, just a sec. That's better, thank you. Essence encompassing all the Buddhas, originator of all the holy Dharma of scripture and realization, principle of all the Aryas intending virtue. In the glorious holy Gurus I take refuge. Please, Gurus, bless my mind to become Dharma, Dharma to become the path, and the path to be without obstacles. Until I achieve Buddhahood, please bless me to be like youthful Nosang and Bodhisattva, always crying, in correctly following the virtuous friend with pure thought and action, seeing whatever is done as pure, and accomplishing whatever is said and advised. Please bless me to see that this greatly meaningful body with freedoms and richnesses is difficult to find and easily perishes, that actions and result are so profound, and that the sufferings of the evil transmigratory beings are so difficult to bear. Therefore, please bless me to take refuge from the depths of my heart in the three rare sublime ones, to abandon negative karma, and to accomplish virtue according to the Dharma. Independent upon that, even if I achieve the mere higher rebirth of a deva or human, I will still have to experience suffering endlessly in samsara, because not having abandoned and being under the control of the disturbing thought obscurations. Therefore, please bless me to reflect well upon the way of circling in samsara and to continuously follow day and night the path of the three types of precious trainings, the principal method for becoming free from samsara. Independent upon that, even if I achieve mere liberation, since there is no sentient being of the six types who has not been my father and mother, please bless me to think I must fulfill their purpose and turn away from the lower happiness of nirvana. Then please bless me to generate precious bodhicitta by equalizing and exchanging myself with others, and to follow the conduct of the conqueror's sons, the six parameters and so forth. Having trained my mind in the common path in that way, I will not be upset even if I have to experience the sufferings of samsara for a long time. However, please bless me to look at sentient beings with extraordinary, unbearable compassion, and to enter the quick path of the Vajrayana teachings. Then please bless me to protect my vows and samaya more than my life, and to quickly accomplish the unified Vajradhara state in one brief lifetime of this degenerate time. May I not give rise to heresy for even a second in regard to the actions of the glorious Guru. May I see whatever actions are done as the stainless actions of a Buddha. With this devotion, may I receive the Guru's blessings in my heart. Magnificent and precious Guru, please abide on the lotus and movement at my heart. Guide me with your great kindness and grant me the realizations of your holy body, speech, and mind. That's okay, thanks. Thanks. So after that, now we can spend a few minutes on that basis, try to generate the awakening mind of bodhicitta, thinking of the kindness of the sentient beings, the infinite sentient beings, mother and father sentient beings, because all the sentient beings have been our mother and father countless times and have been so kind to us as our mother and father, being kind to us and giving us everything we need, just like we see with the parents of this life generally. Experiencing so much suffering and hardships on our behalf, and even creating negative karma in order to be able to take care of us. So now we're thinking of their kindness, and then thinking that just like ourselves, what they want is happiness. And what they don't want is suffering. So they want happiness, they don't know what the causes of happiness are. And so they don't create the causes for happiness. And so they don't experience the happiness they want. And although they don't like suffering, they don't know what the causes of suffering are. And so they don't know how to stop creating the cause of suffering, so they keep suffering. So try to feel a sense of compassion for them, where you find their suffering is unbearable because your mothers and fathers are suffering and you can't bear that. You can't bear that means you can't bear to think about it, so just don't think about it, think about something else. But can't bear that they're suffering, so you feel like I have to do something about this. It's not good enough to leave it to somebody else. This is my responsibility. And though I take responsibility, full responsibility, at the moment, there's really not much I can do. In some ways, there's a lot we can do, but when you think about what really needs to be done, then as an enlightened being, you're really going to be able to help so many sentient beings in so many different ways. And therefore, I have to achieve enlightenment for the sake of sentient beings. Achieving enlightenment is not something you get simply by wanting it or simply by praying for it, asking for it. You have to follow the path that leads to enlightenment. You have to create the causes, in other words. And so in order to create the causes, practice the path, you need to know the path. And that's what we're doing here, learning about the stage of the path to enlightenment. The Six Enemies. Last time we left off, having gone through the mental afflictions, so, truth of suffering, then there's the truth of the origin. For the truth of the origin, you've got karma and mental afflictions. So we looked at the mental afflictions, the klesha. In that thing that we just read by Doji Changlo Sanjimpa, Lama Zopa. It's translated by Lama Zopa. And so you see the phrase there, disturbing thought obscurations. So he's using disturbing thoughts for klesha, the Sanskrit word klesha. And in fact, I've seen, I think, disturbing thoughts and emotions. Also, some people say. I used to say that quite a bit. Anyway, so the mental afflictions. And I'm not going to go through all, I don't review all of them, but I wanted to just look at the first one. So it says the first one of the 10 is desire. So I mentioned this is his choice of translating. Very often you see simply attachment, and I was explaining how we would, anyway, a bit of discussion about. I think mainly I was discussing with myself. But anyway, you see attachment sometimes, you see grasping attachment. I often say grasping attachment. Attachment is what people are familiar with, but actually if you just say attachment, then it seems like we need attachment. And so there's an argument for that. So anyway, grasping attachment, clinging attachment. And some people do say desire, which doesn't really work for me, I think. I mean, it's not like, doesn't seem to work. There's a kind of a kind of dircha. I can't remember what the Sanskrit word is anyway. But anyway, there's a certain kind of attachment which you could describe as desire, maybe, but I don't know, like desire for a big, a big new car, Ferrari or something, or desire for cheesecake or whatever. I know it's just, but anyway, attachment, but also grasping attachment. Anyway, I already went on about that last time. So he says the first of those desire observes an attractive, pleasant external or internal object. So anyway, something which if you're focusing on something attractive, pleasant, whether it's an external or internal object. Then he says, and is subsequently attached to it. So actually, that might be why he doesn't like to translate desire, this word as attachment, but rather desire. But anyway, he said it when it says subsequently attached to it. For me, that gives the sort of impression that you observe the pleasant object and then afterwards you become attached to it. But it's not really. I don't know if it's really that. But the Tibetan word it's got the word subsequent in it. Something following. But it comes up so often. A lot of the time, it doesn't seem to mean anything. But anyway, so the point is that what is attachment? Then it comes out a bit strange, doesn't it? It's a mind that focuses on some nice object and then is attached to it. It's kind of like circular, isn't it? So maybe that's why he says desire is for a nice object, and then you become attached, subsequently attached to, but subsequently attached, I don't know. But anyway, the analogy is very good. The oil that's penetrated into cloth. So anyway, here's one thing. Okay, so it says intensifies. I think more likely increases. Here's one thing, because people sometimes ask, and this is something that might be good for us to think about. So if you want to achieve enlightenment, is that attachment? So think about that. Doesn't it seem to fit this definition? You're focusing on some nice nice object, enlightenment, right? You can make up your own mind whether it's an external or an internal one, an internal object. Anyway, that's what you're focused on. You're attached to it. Well, what does it mean to be attached to something? You might want to say, no, of course, bodhicitta doesn't fit this definition because you're not attached to enlightenment. But in what sense are you not attached to it when you really want it? Something you really want. When you really want something, then wouldn't you call that attachment? I mean, I'm sure you're all thinking, no, there's got to be something wrong with this argument, but why? Why is it not attachment? And I feel, okay, so the use of the word attachment in the definition or the description, whatever, it's a little bit of a giveaway, but still, people will say, well, the thing is, if we're supposed to give up attachment, then when you talk about really wanting to get achieve enlightenment, really like it's day and night, all you want to do is achieve enlightenment. Doesn't that sounds to me like attachment? It sounds like you're attached to achieving enlightenment. It's like it's the only thing you want to do is to achieve enlightenment. Almost sounds like an obsession. Obsessed with achieving enlightenment, right? So anyway, that's something to think about. And I want to say something about it a little bit further down. Okay. Well, anyway, so there are those 10. There are those 10 we went through. Now, yeah. So then, again, if you're in got the same page numbers as me, then it's page 169. And anyway, it's the next heading. It says the stages by which the mental afflictions arise. And this is particularly important. It's going to come up later when we get to the insight section, because by thinking about the stages, the order by which these mental afflictions arise, then that actually brings you to what is the fundamental cause, like the what they call the root cause. They call it the root cause because it's just like if you find the root of the tree and destroy the root, then the whole tree is destroyed. Whereas by just cutting off a branch, the tree keeps growing and so on. So it's called what is the root of all the mental afflictions? If there is one, then it's worth finding out, isn't it? Because then you can focus your energy on that, focus your attention on that. So what does it say? So first of all, okay, let's just read this first bit. If the view of the transitory collection, so remember what that is. Basically, it means grasping at an I, right? Grasping at me. If the view of the transitory collection and ignorance are posited as distinct, okay, so the thing is, you see, in that list, one of them was ignorance, wasn't it? Wasn't it? I think maybe the sixth one. No, it's not the sixth one. The fourth one. Ignorance, okay. So what it comes down to is if you've only been learning about emptiness with the Prasangika view, then you would think to yourself, ignorance, grasping at a self, grasping at true existence, these are all basically the same thing, different ways of referring to the same thing. But there are certain texts and certain, schools of thought within Buddhism which keep these two separate. So ignorance is more like what we normally think of ignorance. It just means not knowing, right? Whereas the view of the transitory collection, grasping at true existence, grasping at a self, and so on, those actually make the mistake. So when these two are considered to be separate, it's like within not knowing, you make mistakes. And the analogy that you find here is very useful. Okay, so if the view of the transitory collection and ignorance are posited as distinct, the stages of how the mental afflictions arise must be understood in the following manner. So he's going to explain how the two fit together in terms of an analogy. And this is an analogy that comes up a lot in the middle way teachings. So it's good that it comes up here, to start thinking about it. So for instance, once darkness has fallen on a coiled rope, so not like darkness in the sense of like pitch black, more like maybe dusk, right? Around dusk where you can't quite see things clearly. You can sort of see shapes, maybe, but anyway, you can't see very clearly. Not like in broad daylight. So you got a coiled rope, and I guess usually they say a coiled striped rope to make it more like a snake. So anyway, so you've got a length of rope that's coiled up, and it's at a distance, it's far enough away, and it's dark enough so that you can see the coil of rope, but you can't see it very clearly, and so you think it's a snake. And in fact, although they say actually in other texts they talk about a striped rope, if it's dusk you probably wouldn't even be able to see the stripes, would you? Maybe you would when you got up close. So anyway, the mind can apprehend that as a snake. He says will, but I mean it's no guarantee. I mean you could in that light, and with it being at that distance, you could think that it's a snake. So if the state of the rope is not clear. So in the same way, because the darkness of ignorance, what that does is you can't see the nature of reality clearly. And within not being able to see the nature of reality clearly, you make mistakes. So he says, because the darkness of ignorance obscures the clear state of the aggregates, the delusion regarding the aggregates as a self arises, and from that, the other mental afflictions. So anyway, it's similar to the coiled rope in the sense that, and you can see the difference between the ignorance and the making the mistake, grasping at a self. This example makes it clear how you could make that distinction. You've got ignorance that can't see properly, and then with not being able to see properly, you make a mistake. It could be a striped rope as a snake. There's all sorts of mistakes you can make when you can't see properly, right? Okay, so like that. But now, if they're posited as the same, which is what they do for sure in Prasangika, I think maybe. Probably across the board in the Madhyamika, philosophies, schools of tenets, they would say that they're the same basically. So in other words, ignorance is a mind that doesn't see how things really are and then grasp them as existing in a way that they don't really exist. So if the two are posited as the same, the view of the transitory collection itself is the root of all the other mental afflictions. Okay, so that grasping at an I, an inherently existent I, is the root of all the others. So that's the main thing to understand. When it talks about the order, that's the main thing. The stages by which the mental afflictions arise, that's the main thing. If you're going to say that the two are different, then it's like within the not knowing of ignorance, then you grasp at an I, existing from its own side. Then within the implication there, actually, and I think this is what they say in that school, is that if you can, because it talks about it particularly in relation to the aggregates, right? What they say is realizing there's no self actually simply means seeing the aggregates clearly. If you see the aggregates clearly, they say, you wouldn't think there's a self there. But because of not seeing the aggregates clearly, that's the ignorance, right? Then you think there's a self there, which is the view of the transitory collection. Okay, so furthermore, so that's so this then it should be a new paragraph. So this is like, like the big point here. If the two are posited as the same, like they do in the Madhyamika, including Prasangika, the view of the transitory collection, which is ignorance, same as ignorance, right, is the root of all the other mental afflictions. Okay, now how it is the root, why it's the root, how we know it's the root, this is something to think about, and I'll talk about it a little bit. Okay, so then it should be a new paragraph, I think. So in fact, so anyway, furthermore, when the view of the transitory collection apprehends a self, a distinction is made between self and other. So I think that's quite interesting, actually, because since this is talking about the mental afflictions, you could be forgiven for thinking that there's something wrong with that. The view of the in other words, once you've got this feeling of an I, strong sense of I, then you're going to make a distinction between self and others. What's wrong with making a distinction between self and others? Self and others are not the same, are they? We are the same, me and you, us, we are similar. We are similar, and we are the same in certain ways. We are not the same, are we? I'm me and you're you, right? I mean, it's just it's just a reality, isn't it? Anyway, so I think that that really, what if you sort of dig a bit deeper here, what it's saying is that when you've got the grasping at an I, then you're going to think, you're not just going to make a distinction between self and others. You're going to think that there's like inherently existing self and inherently existing others. That's the point. Then once you've got that kind of made that kind of distinction, once that is made, okay, so yeah, so once that is made, attachment to one's own side and hatred for the other side arises. So that's the thing, you see. That's the thing. First of all, just making a distinction between self and others is not doesn't mean obligatory. It's not obligatory that you're going to have attachment to your own side and hatred or anger towards the other side, kind of thing. But makes a difference when you're thinking there's a sort of like inherently existing self, and although it doesn't really go into this point here, but when it says self and other, self includes like my friends, my family, right? Not just me, but it could vary. So once that is made, attachment to one's own side and hatred for the other side arises. Then also conceit arises upon observing that self. So I don't know. I think that for me, it's like it's not so much that if you have grasping at an I, that naturally these, like attachment and anger and the, like what is it, pride, conceit, that these are going to grow. Not so much that, it's more like those can only arise when you have this strong sense of I. And so that's something that we can experience, actually. And in fact, something that I think was very kind of Kevji Rinpoche, Namrata Rinpoche. He very strongly recommended his students to, even before you've realized emptiness, but to have to cultivate mindfulness of there being no real I. And so this is definitely something we can do. In other words, what would it mean? If you haven't realized emptiness, thinking, when I think I have there's a sort of like an appearance to my mind of an I that doesn't depend upon anything else. So that I, that feeling of that strong feeling of an I, kind of like concrete, solidly existing I, independently existing I. Anyway, that that's an hallucination. There's no I like that. So that's what he's saying. So, and pretty well you can guarantee whenever we think I, even though they talk about, that sometimes when we be thinking I, it can be a valid mind, sometimes it's an invalid mind. But for us, I think it's inevitable. Whenever we think I, there is an appearance of to us, to our minds, of an I that um, exists in that kind of like very independent and solid way that it doesn't which doesn't represent how it really exists. So if you're able to think to yourself, there is no such I, there's no real I, while you're thinking there is no real I, the other mental afflictions just don't arise, can't operate. It's like they are the air that those mental afflictions breathe. And so just like if you take away the air, the fire goes out. Everybody knows that, right? How you put out a candle is just put something over the top and the air gets used up and then it goes out, right? So it's just like that. It's the fuel of those mental afflictions. So it's like they're going to happily arise and cause all kinds of destruction while there is that belief in or grasping at an I existing from its own side. And as long as you're mindful of, as long as you're cultivating mindfulness of there being no real I, simply by thinking to yourself, there's no real I, and maybe repeating it like a mantra. So it's a practice that we can do, as long as you are not, as long as you are mindful that there's no real I, those mental fictions won't arise. And sometimes when you think it doesn't seem to work, if you check up, what you'll find is that when the mental afflictions do arise, whether it's attachment or whether it's anger or jealousy, whatever it is, what's happened is you lost your mindfulness that there's no real I. Somehow you I mean, it's just natural, isn't it? We get distracted. So you start off, like you're thinking no real I, there's no real I. Then things happen and you get distracted and you lose that thought, and then the anger and attachment and all the other mental afflictions arise, but they can only arise because you lost that mindfulness. And I think that that's a way that we can discover through our own experience that grasping at an I is the root of all the other mental afflictions. Somehow we've got the propensity for all of these other mental afflictions to arise when we, depending upon the circumstances, let's say. Okay, so you see something nice, you've got the habit of being attached to it. You see somebody who's said something unpleasant to you, you've got this habit to feel kind of like irritated with them, jealousy arising and so on. And so those, the main kind of like condition for them to be able to arise is having this grasping at an I, thinking that there is a real I in the way that it appears. So I think that's very useful anyway. So anyway, we can finish reading this, but I think that's the main point here. And that's the main point. So furthermore, when the view of the transitory collection apprehends a self, a distinction is made between self and others. Once that is made, attachment to one's own side and hatred for the other side arise. So it's attachment into anger. Also conceit. So up above, it was listed as pride. So conceit. that kind of pride, arises upon observing that self, then that very self is then held to be permanent. In other words, it's something static, never changing, going to go on forever. Subject to annihilation, in other words, after this life, it's going to become non-existent. And that self is held to be of the self. I'm not sure about that. Anyway, then the bad. Then you got the to do with that last one, maybe not the last one, one before last, the ninth one, the one about mistaken ethics and practices. So then those also can arise, are all based upon an I, like grasping at a real I. So then likewise, wrong views are generated that think that the teacher who taught selflessness, the actions and effects that he taught, the four truths, the three jewels and so forth, do not exist. So why they would come up because of grasping at an I, that's something to think about. Not sure about that. Or alternatively, the doubt is generated that things, do they exist or not? Are there a certain way or not? Okay, so then there's this nice quote from the valid cognition. Yes. Okay, so before going into that, well, maybe I'll read that out and then there's one or two other things I wanted to say. So in the commentary on the Compendium of Valid Cognition, so Compendium of Valid Cognition is by Dignaga. And then the commentary, the Pramanavartika, that's by Dhammakirti. When there's a self, there's awareness of other. Dividing between them brings grasping and anger. Every fault comes into being closely connected with those two. So this is Lama Tsongkhapa often does that. He's just explained how things are. He's given his commentary, and then he follows up with, and you can see the truth of what I've been saying from this important Indian commentary. So in other words, it's not just me that's saying this. Dhammakirti is also saying that. So when there's a self, in other words, grasping at an I, a real I, there's awareness of other, which means grasping at inherently existing other, right? Then making that kind of distinction, that brings about grasping, by which he means attachment, grasping attachment, and anger. And then everything goes wrong because of those two. Closely connected with those two, attachment and anger. So you've got the grasping at a self, then attachment and anger, because making the distinction between like inherent existing I, inherent existing other, and then everything goes wrong based upon that, which means all the other mental afflictions, then all of the karma that we create under the control of those mental afflictions, and then just have to carry on suffering. So yeah, so anyway, probably we can say with all the mental afflictions, but it's certainly obvious with the attachment and anger, also with the ignorance. So remember that those three are referred to as the three poisonous minds. So while the ignorance is the root of all the other mental afflictions, those three, if you wanted to, how can I put this? Well, anyway, those three are the basis of all the other mental afflictions. So really, if you're able to understand those three, and you're able to work with those three, then it's going to have this kind of like knock-on effect with the other ones. It will affect them also. Okay, so right, yeah. So those three, attachment and anger and ignorance, they even though you might not see it in the definition, like here it did. Lama Tsongkhapa, when he's talking about when he calls it desire, right? This translator. Even though Lama Tsongkhapa doesn't talk about exaggeration, there's always exaggeration involved. With the mental afflictions, there's always exaggeration. So in the case of attachment, and I can remember so many times hearing my teacher Gentechok saying this, from the side of the object, it might be like 20% nice, attractive. Then the attachment exaggerates 80% on top of that and makes it 100% nice. So it makes it perfect. So actually, the attachment itself makes the object into something more desirable. So that's how he used to explain it, and that's quite interesting, actually. When you think about on the one hand, in the Madhyamika teachings, it talks about there's nothing existing from the side of the object, but the way that my teacher was explaining attachment, from the side of the object, it could be like 20% beautiful or attractive or whatever, and then attachment exaggerates on more pleasant qualities on top of that. So is that contradictory with the Prasangika idea that there's nothing existing from the side of the object or not? Seems to be, and yet think about it. In the teachings on karma, it talks about certain actions lead to a very ugly appearance, and then certain actions can lead to a very beautiful appearance. I don't know I think it came up already, in the teachings on karma, when it talks about the 4 types of result, the ripening result, and so on. There's that story about the guy who was involved in building a stupa and was complaining about it, and then in the end offered a golden bell to go on top of it. And so as a result of offering the golden bell, he had a very beautiful voice. But they used to keep him hidden, because if you saw him, he is so hideous looking because of the criticism while he was involved in making it. So there's no question, like in the teachings on karma, in the teachings about the practice of the perfections. So patience leads to a very beautiful appearance. They talk about how Lama Atisha was apparently extremely handsome, very handsome person. Lama Tsongkhapa not so much, from what I gather. His Holiness says anyway. Anyway, but yeah, so it seems like there can be what do you call it, something beautiful from the side of the object. Otherwise, we'd have to say there are no beautiful people and there are no ugly people. Anyway, so anyway, the exaggerating. Anyway, it exaggerates. There's exaggeration going on. And another thing, okay, that's so sometimes when the definitions don't seem very convincing, let's say, or we don't understand the definitions very well, this is one important way of distinguishing between like the mental afflictions on the one hand and then like more, let's say, reality-based attitudes towards things. There's the presence or absence of exaggeration. But then another one is that generally, if it's a mental affliction, then it creates a kind of like disturbance. It disturbs your mind. It sometimes in the case of attachment, it's not so obvious, because one feels so much attachment is towards the things that I like, and so if I don't have the attachment, then I'm not going to get the things I like, and all that kind of idea comes up. But still, anyway, the what was it I wanted to say? Anyway, so the exaggeration, yeah. So creating suffering in the mind. Sometimes not so obvious short term, but definitely long term. So that's one thing. And sometimes that's obvious. Sometimes that's obvious, and sometimes it's not so obvious. But then, and there's another thing which I think is very interesting, which is that in the case of the mental afflictions, the this is maybe more to do with the way in which the ignorance is the root of all the other ones, the other mental afflictions. But anyway, I think it's a really useful thing to understand that as your ignorance, when your ignorance is weaker, in other words, when grasping an eye is weaker and there's less selfishness in the mind, then the mental afflictions, all of the other mental afflictions, become weaker. Okay, sorry, they become they become stronger, is what I meant to say. So the stronger the grasping in an eye and the stronger the selfishness is, the stronger those mental afflictions are. And the weaker your grasping at an eye is, and the weaker your selfishness is, the weaker the mental afflictions are going to be. Does that make sense? I think I might have got things back to front. Anyway, strong ignorance and strong selfishness leads to strong mental afflictions. And then weak grasping at an eye, weak selfishness means that the mental afflictions, the other mental afflictions, I should say, really, become weaker. Now, that's one thing. Okay. However, in the case of like compassion and loving kindness and so forth, the stronger your grasping at an eye and the stronger your selfishness is, the weaker your compassion and loving kindness are. And the weaker your grasping at an eye and your selfishness is, the stronger your loving kindness and compassion and bodhicitta become. So that's one huge difference between, on the one hand, the positive states of mind, and the other side, the more destructive states of mind, the mental afflictions. Okay. All right. Okay. So then if we go on to Lama Tsongkhapa's talks about the faults of the mental afflictions, and it's interesting because not much explanation, lots of quotes. Kind of a basis for meditation, really. So first of all, so it's the heading is actually the third of, I don't know how many points, but anyway, it's the third one. The faults of the mental afflictions. First of all, he has a quote from the ornament for the Mahayana Sutras, the Sutra Alankara. That's by Maitreya. The mental afflictions destroy you, in other words, destroy yourself. They destroy sentient beings, and they destroy your ethics. So this is, I mean, we could talk about this now, but I think, if you think about it, it's interesting to think about. It's interesting and quite, I don't know, satisfying to work it out for yourself, the way in which the mental afflictions destroy you. Obviously not destroy in the sense of like totally making non-existent. It's like destroying, like, completely ruin things. They ruin things for yourself. So then they destroy sentient beings, they destroy ethics. You become lax. I know about lax. I looked at the Tibetan. It's more like it brings about like a deterioration, a degeneration. Like it brings about a degeneration or deterioration of your qualities and so on. It brings about poverty. Then so the guardians, like Dharma protectors, the powerful beings that are fond of the positive side, they revile you. And where he says the teachers revile you, This word Tumba usually it means the teacher, as in Shakyamuni Buddha. Then there will be nasty disputes. You will take rebirth elsewhere in unfree states. So remember, we talk about the 8 leisures and the 10 endowments. I can't remember the terms he uses, but anyway, those 8, those are freedoms from unfree states. So being born in the lower realms and so on. Even being born as a human, but your mind being closed, that kind of thing. So being born into such situations. Then through the loss of what you had attained or had not attained, had hoped to attain. Yeah, maybe that's better. Through the loss of what you had attained or had hoped to attain. So what you got, then you lose. And then what you wanted to get, you couldn't get. So this brings about so much mental suffering. So that's the faults of the mental afflictions in that one verse in the Sutra Ankara. Then the Bodhisattva entering the middle, Bodhisattva way, Shantideva. So this is quite nice. Enemies such as hatred and craving do not have arms, legs, and so on. They have no valor either. So why is it that they have reduced me to servitude? Why is it that I have to, serve them? Why am I the slave of the mental afflictions, given that they don't have arms, legs, they can't do anything physically to me. They're not brave. How did it come to be like this? While abiding in my mind, they happily inflict harm on me. The patience that does not get angry at them is unsuitable, blameworthy patience. In other words, being patient in the sense of like just leaving them be, when they harm, not doing anything to counter them. So usually we talk about practicing patience when people harm us, don't harm them back, And in fact, he makes the point later on, which is connected to that. So that's the wrong kind of patience. Being patient with the mental afflictions is the wrong kind of patience. Then he says, even if all of the gods and all the demigods were to rise up as enemies against me, they could not lead me or put me into the fires of the Affici hells. They couldn't make me go to the hell realms. They couldn't do that. But the mental afflictions, these powerful foes, throw me into it in one instant. So your own mental afflictions, which are inside you, they can throw you into the hell realms just like that. With one moment of anger, for example, it can do that. Where nothing met with, not even Mount Meru is left behind, not even ashes. Yeah, so then compared to my foes, the mental afflictions, protracted, in other words, like very long enduring, with neither beginning nor end, not one of all my other enemies could possibly endure so long. So it's like your mental afflictions have been afflicting you, have been causing you trouble without ever changing since beginningless lifetimes. Every lifetime doing nothing else apart from being your enemy, the real enemy. When we talk about friend, enemy, and strange, with the meditation on equanimity, we have that idea, that somebody can be your best friend in this life, maybe last life, maybe even earlier in this life, they might have been your worst enemy. So friend, enemy, stranger, these are always changing. Nothing is fixed, right? And also he makes the point, while everyone else helps you and makes you happy when you act harmoniously and with reverence. So this is talking about the fact that somebody can be your worst enemy, but if you're careful and you treat them right, they can turn into your best friend. But with the mental afflictions, it's never like that. So like being kind to them would mean like letting them do what they want, right? And so what do they want to do? Harm you. That's all they ever want to do. They never ever want to do something that's going to help you. You might think they're helping you. Like they say, attachment gets me what I want, and then my anger protects me from enemies. What's it they say there that I think this may be something I heard His Holiness the Dalai Lama say, that everything which we think we're going to get with the mental afflictions, but up until now have never been able to get, we will be able to get by freeing ourselves from mental afflictions. So reflect on the fault stated here. Did I read that? Oh no, I didn't read the whole of that verse. So while everyone helps you and makes you happy when you act harmoniously and with reverence, if you attend to the mental afflictions, in other words, if you follow them, actually, so if you follow them, if you go along with them, then they will inflict suffering and harm in return, and nothing else. So though that's the great Indian masters, and then Gombawa, uh, a Tibetan master. So a couple of quotes from him. So usually this is more obvious in the Larim Chem or Lama Tsongkhapa's great exposition of the stage of Pa. So he explain things. He'll explain things. Then he'll quote from the sutras, then from the Indian masters, and then the Tibet masters. So Gombawa says, to eliminate the mental afflictions, you must know their faults, their definitions, their antidotes, and the causes for their arising. That just about covers it. Once you've understood their faults, you should see them as faults and apprehend them as enemies. If you do not understand their faults, you will not understand them to be enemies. Therefore, you should contemplate them along the lines of the statements from the Ornament for the Mahayana Sutras and Entering the Bodhisattva Way. So presumably, for example, at least anyway, those two passages that have been quoted above. Right. Then, and in order to know the definitions of the mental afflictions, you should also study the Abhidhamma, at least the explanation of the five aggregates. So I forgot to look this up, but that's actually available in English, interestingly. And I've heard elsewhere this is, like it's so you've got the Abhidhamma Kosha by Vasubandhu. It itself is not that huge, but when you look at the commentaries, it's a huge subject. They in the monasteries they spend 2 years studying that, or maybe even more actually. I don't know, 2 or 3 years studying the Abhidhamma Kosha. But anyway, there's this text called the Explanation of the Five Aggregates. I have to think. I think it was translated by Art Engel. I can't remember the publisher. It might be what do you call it? Could be Shambhala. Not sure. I've got a copy of it, but not here in the States. Yeah, it might even be called the. It might even have the five aggregates in the title. It should do. Yeah. Anyway, it's that thick. It's a very thick book, and I've had it for. I reckon I've had it for about at least 10 years, maybe 15 years. And it's in mint condition, which means I haven't read it. But it does look interesting. It does look interesting. Okay. Okay, so he says, yeah, at least the explanation of the five aggregates. Once you have become acquainted with the root and secondary afflictions, you will identify attachment, anger, and so forth, whatever it is, as soon as they arise in your mind stream, thinking, this is that. Oh no, it has arisen. This is that. Oh no. and you will then fight the mental afflictions. So this kind of understanding is necessary. Okay. Well, now it's 5, and so that's good. Now, if we move on to the next chapter, actually, maybe we'll have just a couple of minutes break. I keep forgetting to have breaks, but a couple of minutes, 2-3 minutes, thinking over these things a little bit. Try to review in your mind, or just think about something in relation to what we've just been talking about. Okay, so shall we carry on? So according to this book, we're on chapter 13, and it's called Cyclic Existence and Liberation. Cyclic existence, right? So I have to say cyclic. Otherwise, people think you're saying psychic. Psychic existence, right? Psychic existence. Sounds pretty far out. Okay, so now the next thing, having talked about the mental afflictions, I guess the first one was about the mental afflictions. Now it's about karma. How karma is thereby accumulated by those mental afflictions. So first of all, talking about the karma that's being accumulated, and then how it's accumulated. Okay. So now here, yeah. So excuse me, but I don't really have much I'm not sure about this, the way that this first sentence goes. He says mental karma is the karma that is intention, the mental factor that makes its concomitant mind move and urges it towards the object, towards objects. So that's it's getting there, I think. So well, this is what I think it means anyway, how I would put it. So looking, I looked at the Tibetan, and this is the kind of idea I got. So as for karma that is intention, so you see, the thing is here, what he's talking about, that was what I was talking about, is sembile, sembile. So sembile is karma which is intention. Semba is a mental affliction, intention. So 5 all accompanying mental factors. So when you have the function of intention, that basically every mind has one component of it is intention, and the function of that component of the mind, intention, is to make the mind, the rest of the mind and all the other mental factors go to this and that object. So sembele, karma which is intention, and then sambele is intended karma. And thinking about this, it seems, before going into it, basically, you see, in the there are these different schools of tenets, right? In Buddhism, you've got Vaibhashika, Sautrantika, Chittamatra, and Madhyamika. So in the Vaibhashika school, so I think I'm right here anyway. In the Vaibhashika school, they would say that that the karmas of body, speech, and mind are all physical, which means so like the 3 of the body, like in the case of the negative karma, so the non-virtuous karmic paths, so you've got killing, the karma of killing, the karma of karmic path of killing and of stealing and of sexual misconduct. Those are all physical. Their form, they have kind of form, maybe a sort of not necessarily a visible form, but anyway, they have their form, they're physical things. And so then the likewise with the 4 speech, so they would be speech. Anyway, their form anyway. That much is clear. Their form, and it's only the 3 of the mind which are mind. But what this is talking about is actually how our understanding of it, coming from the higher schools of tenets, is that karma is all intention. And sometimes you hear the lamas saying, or the Geshe saying, karma is the mental factor of intention. So they're all intention. So and what that means is that from that point of view, when we talk about the 7 of body and speech, then the karma would be the mental factor intention, which is there present with those karmas when you're like accumulating those karmas. Okay, so that's more or less it, I think. So now, so first of all, that first sentence where it says mental karma is the karma that is intention, the mental factor that makes its concomitant mind move and urges it towards its object. So that's why I would say what it's saying actually is karma that is intention. Okay, so you've got karma which is intention versus intended karma, right? Karma which is intention, what that is it's mental karma, and specifically it's the mental factor that moves and urges its concomitant mind, the mind that it accompanies, and all the other mental factors to its object. Okay. So that gives you a rough idea, I think. So then so now he goes on to talk about what the Vaibhashikas say, and then how Vasubandhu refutes that, and then he tells you, this is our position, kind of thing. So I don't know why he's put first there, but anyway, the Vaibhashikas divide the calm of body and speech that is motivated by that intention into perceptible and imperceptible, and posit them as only being form. What that means is there's form, which is sometimes they call it revelatory form and non-revelatory form. So he's chosen to use the word perceptible. Okay. So you've got anyway, perceptible form and imperceptible form. Of those two, the karma of body and speech that is motivated by that intention, which is mentioned just above, is form. And of the two, I'm not sure whether they would say it's the perceptible or imperceptible, actually, whether they would think more in terms of the actual visible action that you can see happening, or something going on a more subtle level. Okay, so the Vaibhashikas divide the karma of body and speech that is motivated by that intention into perceptible and imperceptible form, and posit them as being only form. So that's the main point. As far as the Vaibhashikas are concerned, the karma of body and speech are form. Master Vasubandhu, the author of the Abhidhamma Kosha, Master Vasubandhu refutes that and maintains that the karma of body and speech is the intention that operates together with the perceptible, visible, and verbal actions. So in other words, what he says is, when you've got those visible things going on, of course, with the karmas of speech, it's like audible. When those things are going on, then there is the mental factor of intention that's there at the same time, and that's the karma of body and the karma of speech. So he says that. So whereby he explains both types of karma to also be intention. So I mean, it's best if you can understand all that. It would be best if we could understand all that. But the conclusion is, when we talk about the 10 non-virtues, then in terms of the karma is always the mental factor of intention. So that's the main thing, anyway. As far as, and that's the main point he's trying to make there. Okay. Now he actually goes on to talk about the different types of karma. So he says, in this regard, non-virtuous karma is non-meritorious karma. If you've studied the 12 links, then you'll have heard of this idea: meritorious, non-meritorious, and then unmoving, immovable. So in this regard, non-virtuous karma is called non-meritorious karma. And these are usually terms that are only used in relation to the kind of throwing karma that can make you be born and take birth in cyclic existence. But anyway, let's leave that for the moment. So non-virtuous karma is also called non-meritorious karma. Then what about meritorious karma? Meritorious karma is virtuous karma included in the level of the desire realm. So what that means is virtuous actions which cause you to be born in the desire realm, virtuous actions which cause you to be born in the desire realm, which would act as the cause for you to be born as a human or as a desire realm god. That's called meritorious karma. So included in the level of the desire realm is a bit of a sort of sticky topic, but what it means is for for us, what we need to take away mainly is the kind of virtuous karma that makes you born in the as a human being or as a desire on God, or also like the demigods. That's called meritorious karma. It's that kind of virtuous karma. But there's another kind of virtuous karma which doesn't make you take birth in the desire realm, either as a human or as a desire realm God, but is a kind of karma which is virtuous, but causes you to be born in one of the four levels of the form realm or the four levels of the formless realm. So that's called immovable karma. So he finishes off this section by saying, immovable karma is contaminated virtuous karma included in the levels of the form and formless realm. So he adds contaminated there because you've got there's such a thing as uncontaminated karma, uncontaminated virtuous karma. So this is contaminated. Contaminated by what? Contaminated by the mental afflictions. It's still good karma, but it's basically because you've still got the grasping there, right? Grasping at a real eye. So is that okay? So just to mention again briefly, identifying the karma that's accumulated, what that's saying is when we talk about karma, whatever other schools of tenets might say, as far as we're concerned, karma is the mental factor intention. There are three types of karma. There are other ways of classifying karma as well, but anyway, one way of classifying karma is in terms of the non-meritorious karma, which means non-virtuous karma. Meritorious karma, which is the kind of virtuous karma that causes you to be born as a human being or a desire of God. Immovable karma, which is the kind of karma that causes you to be born in the form and formless realms. Okay, so that's that one. Then how karma is accumulated? Still, we can get a bit further. Let's see. Right, so how karma is accumulated? Once you've directly realized selflessness, you can still be born in cyclic existence under the power of karma and the mental afflictions. However, you do not newly accumulate any propelling karma. So that might surprise you. It might not. I don't know. So in other words, somebody who's not just realized emptiness, but has a direct realization of emptiness, they can still take birth in one of the six realms under the control of karma and the mental afflictions, but they don't create any new throwing karma. Throwing karma is the karma that has the power to cause you to be born in one of the six realms. They don't create any new karma of that type, but you can still be born in cyclic existence because of the karma you accumulated prior to that. Okay. So propelling karma, again, you're propelling karma and not completing karma, accomplishing karma. These also come up with the 12 links. So I'm hoping that after this, we'll couple of classes at least, maybe 2 or 3 on the 12 links on the Wheel of Life. Therefore, those who accumulate the karma that propels one into cyclic existence are all ordinary beings. So in other words, since Aryas, so once you have a direct realization of emptiness, then you're called an Arya, right? A superior being, an Arya. So since Aryas don't accumulate throwing karma, anybody that accumulates throwing karma must be somebody who's not an Arya. In other words, an ordinary being. Therefore, those who accumulate the karma that propels one into cyclic existence are all ordinary beings. And so ordinary being, I mean, it's a relative term, really, but when you're talking about ordinary beings as distinct from Arya beings, you're talking about anybody that doesn't have a direct realization of emptiness. So that means everybody that hasn't entered into the path. I mean, you just before entering into the path, you can have a realization of emptiness, but not a direct realization. So anyway, everybody who hasn't entered the path, but also everybody who has entered the path, right up to what it's saying here is up to the path of seeing. You have the path of accumulation, 5 paths, right? Path of accumulation, path of preparation, path of seeing, path of meditation, path of no more training. So on the first 2 of those paths, you can still create propelling karma. Right. So therefore, those are all ordinary beings, up to and including those abiding on the great level of supreme worldly dharma on the Mahayana path of preparation. So he doesn't particularly mention about the Hinayana path, but on the Mahayana path, so you've got the path of accumulation, path of preparation. Path of preparation has got 4 levels: heat, peak, forbearance, or patience. Sometimes they call it, and then the highest one is called sublime dharma or supreme dharma. So he's called it here the supreme worldly dharma. Some people do say that the word worldly isn't there in the Tibetan. It's called the maybe there is a version of it, but not one that I'm familiar with. They usually say Chöchok, so the supreme dharma. I don't think dharma in the sense of like Buddha Dharma Sangha, more like dharma in the sense of like, we talk about dharma can just mean anything actually in a general way. So only the supreme or sublime dharma of the Mahayana path preparation. Then he goes on to say, if with that body, which body? Therefore, those. Well, anyway, so it's it says that body. I mean, obviously that must mean the body that you have on those levels as an ordinary being. If with that body you create non-virtuous actions by means of the 3 doors, body, speech, and mind, for example, killing, then you will accumulate non-meritorious karma. If you create virtuous actions such as giving gifts and guarding ethics, in other words, practice of generosity, practice of morality, you will accumulate meritorious karma. If you cultivate shamatha, karma binding, and the like, included in the form realm dhyanas and the levels of the formless realms, you will accumulate immovable karma. So that's telling us that to create the karma to be born in as a god in one of the form and formless realms, then you would need first of all to cultivate achieve shamatha karma. Let's see. I don't know. Any questions? I don't know if I want to finish off with death. I guess it's just superstitious, but maybe. Well, anyway, this is a good time to stop because we usually go over with the prayers, but maybe this time you won't need to. So anyway, we had a little bit of another look at the mental afflictions, looking at how you can distinguish between something which is a mental affliction and something which isn't, that kind of thing, and then the faults of the mental afflictions, then the karma that's created by those, so 3 types of karma. And then next thing will be having once you created these various types of karma, then what happens when you die, how you're reborn, talks about the conditions for death, the mind of death, where the heat withdraws from the body, how the intermediate state is reached after death, and how you take rebirth. Then that should be the end of this chapter, I think. Oh, the measure of its development, the measure, sort of like the definition of having generated the mind of renunciation and the wish for liberation, eliminating misconceptions. So we've got two more classes left. We might be able to finish. We'll see. No, maybe not. Not very confident of that. Okay, so please let's do some dedication prayers, please. Dedication, good. Dedicating all the virtue or merits of the past, present, and future of oneself and others. May the precious supreme bodhicitta not yet born arise. May that arisen not decline, but increase more and more. Due to all the past, present, and future merits collected by me, and all the merits of the 3 times collected by numberless Buddhas and numberless sentient beings, may bodhicitta be generated in the hearts of all sentient beings of the 6 realms, and especially in the hearts of everybody in this world, including all the students, benefactors, and volunteers in the FBMT organization, especially the Land of Buddha. May it be generated in the hearts of all those who rely upon me, all those for whom I have promised to pray, and all those whose names have been given to me. May it be generated in my heart and in the hearts of all my family members, those who are living and those who have died. May the bodhicitta that has already been generated increase. Incomparably kind and supreme Tenzin Gyatso, the wish-granting, wish-fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world, may you have a long life and all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. I fully dedicate all these virtues to be able to train just like the hero Manjushri who knows reality, and just like Samantabhadra as well. I fully dedicate all my roots of virtue with the dedication praised as the best by all the gone beyond victorious ones of the 3 times in order to have good conduct. So those previous 2 verses, I always find the a bit difficult to understand literally, but anyway, the first of those 2 is basically saying I dedicate all that in exactly the same way all the bodhisattvas of the past and have dedicated, present ones are dedicating, and all the bodhisattvas of the future will dedicate. I dedicate exactly to all of that happening. And then the next verse is to dedicate in the way that all of the Tathagatas, all of the Buddhas of the past, present, and future dedicate, have dedicated, will dedicate. Due to this virtue, may I quickly become a Guru Buddha and lead all transmigratory beings without exception to that state. Due to the past, present, and future merits collected by me, the numberless Buddhas and the numberless sentient beings which are completely empty of existing from their own side, may I, who am completely empty of existing from my own side, achieve the state of full enlightenment which is completely empty of existing from its own side, and lead all sentient beings who are completely empty of existing from their own side, to that state which is completely empty of existing from its own side by myself alone, who am completely empty of existing from my own side. As long as any sentient being has not been liberated from samsara, may I abide in samsara to help them, even though I achieve highest enlightenment. By merely seeing, hearing, thinking about, or remembering me, as well as by touching me or talking to me, may all suffering instantly be pacified, and may there be happiness forever. Peerless teacher and assembly of the children of the victorious ones, Shravakas and Prajika Buddhas, victorious Losang, father and sons, along with the lineage masters, all the objects of refuge of infinite lands, please bestow the virtue and goodness of accomplishing this prayer here and now. Holding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, you wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable, venerable Guru, to you I make request. while striving single-pointedly for the sake of the victorious one's teachings, the sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, and for mother living beings, you suddenly departed to peace. What a great loss. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the blessings of the ocean of the three jewels, and the great waves of bodhicitta of the children of the victorious ones, may the smile of a reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for fortunate disciples. Okay. So thanks everybody, and see you all next week, hopefully.